Hi, so we are closing the session. I'm very sorry, we're going out of conference, Interactive Health, but we are super excited to have our keynote speaker, Hugo Campos. Hugo has been a really great voice to hear in healthcare. He has been confronted with issues in accessing healthcare, which I think have triggered in him a strength and a drive to change healthcare for the good, and bringing a lot of these patient perspectives in what it means technology, how technology can help provide or enable patients to have the agency they would aspire to. So without further ado, I will not say anything else so that Hugo can impress us with his thoughts. Thank you, Hugo.
All right. Good morning, and thank you so much, Francisco, for the introduction. And thank you for the invitation. Being here to me is profoundly significant, and I'll tell you the reasons why. Not because being among all of you, but to be here in Portugal, in Porto. I've always wanted to visit. This is my first time, and Portugal is pátria de meus maiores, which means, I suppose, like the poet of Luís de Camões might have said, the land of my ancestors, and a place my family comes from. So thank you for inviting me. I had written an entirely different opening for this, but after sitting with all of you for the last couple of days, I felt that I had to rewrite it. So I blame you guys. It's your fault. But I only added one slide, and it's this slide. This photo wasn't even meant for public consumption. The one, neither one of them. The one on the right was sent for a friend, to a friend. But this is me, and in the yellow shirt there, with at my kitchen table in Oakland, California, near San Francisco, where we live. And this is what I do at least once a month. I'm sorting my dad's medication. We have a box for 31 days, and it takes about a dozen different medications. And every family has a kitchen table like this. It's, I guess, in the U.S., we call it the proverbial kitchen table, right? The place where people have the everyday conversations. And this is ours, and it's where my dad and I sit every day and work out what comes next. He's 96, and he just turned 96 at the end of June. And he's in cognitive decline and has a lot of challenges. And but every decision about his health that we face together, I have to translate it twice. I translate it once to Portuguese, and then translate it once into something that a 96-year-old mind can remember. And healthcare is complex to a point where sometimes even people with advanced degrees get lost in it. As you probably have experienced in your own lives. And this is the table where the real decisions are made, and sitting at this table, there's never been a designer, and not once. And I can say this to all of you, and I feel like I'm comfortable to tell you this in this room, because the past few days I've watched how all of you in this community, you all did something that I almost never see at a health conference. And I saw you guys question your own work in public with a live stream. And yeah, it's brave. And I remember on Monday somebody asked even whether the right design is sometimes non-design. It came up today again, and or perhaps no design at all. It's perhaps better not to intervene. Another presenter said, after presenting her her work and doing amazing work, and she says, I don't have a clear answer. From right here in this stage. And so I wrote down on my notes, I wrote down, multiple times I wrote down the word humility. Right? And so let me ask you with love, and this comes from a good place, where are the designers in my life, right? Where are the designers in my life as a patient and as a caregiver? And it's not for lack of caring, that's obvious to me. So is it a problem of architecture? Is a problem of healthcare, how healthcare is built and who it's built around? So most of this field, from what I can tell, designs for the institution and calls it designing for the patient. And the institution stands in as my proxy. It's the proxy of the patient. But the institution doesn't do the patient's bidding. So at the end of the day, patients are like that, alone in their kitchen table. Nobody wants to engage with healthcare anyway. Who wants that? Who wants engagement with your provider, with your medication? And nobody wants to be reminded that they're sick. So there's I'm a fan of an American comedian named George Carlin. Some of you may know him. He's since passed. And he used to do a bit, and it's on the internet, you can look it up. It's interesting, fun, it's funny. This won't be funny though. He had a bit about how we feel like some of us feel like we need to change, we need to fix the world, we need to save the trees, we need to save the bees, we need to save the whales. That's kind of how he said it. And he called it an arrogance because according to George Carlin, we don't even know how to take care of ourselves, right? And we haven't learned how to care for one another. So, and I think he was right to some extent. And so consider this. Maybe patients don't need saving. 2.5 years ago, something finally showed up at this table. And it wasn't a designer. It was generative AI. So what happens next comes down to one word, and to me, what that word is agency, and it's a new kind of agency. AI is giving patients the confidence and the ability to act on our own behalf without asking for permission, and it's changing the game. So I'm a patient, I'm a caregiver. And everything I know about healthcare, I learned inside the American system, and that's the perspective that I bring today. And I ask you to sort of keep that in mind, because it will inform what I tell you. But before we go into it, I want to tell you about the last time that I told this story. And it was about 6 weeks ago, and I was in Seattle. I was at Academy Health conference. And when I finished, a man walked up to the microphone during the Q&A and introduced himself as a medical doctor from Harvard. And he started by complimenting me, saying that I was very articulate, which sounded exactly how you think it would have sounded. He told me that I was doing the work that I was doing and what I was doing vis-a-vis advocating for patient use of AI was irresponsible, and that AI should be left to the experts. He then asked me 2 questions. He says, where are the boundaries of what patients should be allowed to do, and who takes responsibility for self-management? And I ask you to hold on to these questions. We'll come back to them at the end and revisit them. Now, when somebody asks what a patient should be allowed to do, that's not only a safety question, it is also a power question, right? And mind you, he didn't come up with these questions himself. He was expressing the classic culture of medicine. It's what he was taught to believe. He actually inherited the script, and he inherited from this. This is what you're looking at is the American Medical Association's first code of ethics, 1847. And it tells doctors to unite tenderness with firmness and condescension with authority. Actually, condescension is written into the founding code. It is not a flaw to avoid, it's an instruction to follow. It's a design feature. On the very next page, the same chapter, it says doctors should give reasonable indulgence to the mental imbecility of the sick. Reasonable indulgence. You don't indulge it too much, just some amount. In other words, doctors were instructed to tolerate within limits the impaired judgment, the confusion, and mental weakness of patients. So the compliant patient, the silent patient, the differential patient was never an accident, it was designed in. And the doctor, we're all designing it in every day. We continue to do this. The doctor in Seattle wasn't being arrogant. He was being faithful to a script that was written almost 180 years before he got to the microphone. So today we're building some of the most powerful tools in human history. They will change everything about the world in which we live. And they will not sound like it's 1847. No, they'll sound kinder. They will sound more helpful. They might even sound empathic, right? But being kind, being helpful, and being empathic is not the same as leaving you in charge. So the real question is, will AI inherit the old script from 1847, or will it finally break it? For the last 2.5 years, all the conversation about AI in healthcare has been about what it can do for doctors, what it can do for hospitals, and what it can do for health systems. But something remarkable is happening right now, and it's patients. Patients using AI with skill and with agency in a way that's changing what it means to be a patient. We are taking control of our health narratives and turning AI into a tool for liberation. And most of healthcare hasn't yet caught up with what patients are doing. When folks look at patient use of AI, all they see is fear. All they see is worry that patients will hurt themselves. So the conversation tends to always land on the same words. It's about keeping people safe, or it's about building trust. But where we see agency, they see risk. And the question, I think, worth asking is risk according to whom? To quote fellow advocate Sue Sheridan of Patients for Patient Safety, she says, she just said this early this year, while doctors adopt AI at the speed of trust, patients adopt it at the speed of desperation. So what Sue means here is that when you're diagnosed with a life-threatening condition and when you need to understand complexity, or when you are in pain and the system is not available to you, AI may be all you have. Right? And I think what's being missed here is that AI is now allowing patients to do things far beyond simply using a chatbot. The research conversation is only starting to catch up with what many patients are already doing. And that's, I suppose, good news, but I kind of wish that we were further ahead understanding this phenomenon. So let me show you a little bit how far we've come in just a couple of years. And you may remember ChatGPT, I think 3.5 was released to the public in November 2023, I think. So about 2 years ago, when we talked about sophisticated use of AI by patients, it meant that perhaps the patient was uploading a lab result or an after-visit summary to a chatbot for a one-off read. Today, patients are building entire project notebooks. Folks are building custom skills, as I have done myself, that run analysis across dozens of documents through a lens that they define. And that is the shift from asking a chatbot to unleashing agents at a problem. A few things about me before we sort of go much deeper into this. I live with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. That's a relatively common type of genetic heart muscle disease. and puts people at risk for sudden cardiac arrest. I'm one such lucky person, and that means I have an implantable defibrillator. I'm on my third device. I've had these devices for 18 and a half years. I'm also the care advocate for my dad, 96 years old, who lives with my husband and with me and has a number of complex health issues. And to make matters more exciting, is also a world-class contrarian. And I'm a patient advocate. I'm a partner in research. I'm part of the NIH All of Us research program. I'm part of the Nutrition for Precision Health study. Runs on top of the All of Us and a bunch of other PCORI-funded studies and a bunch of other things. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here because I've used generative AI for my health and my father's health nearly every day for the last 3.5 years. So everything I'm about to tell you comes from my lived experience. Not theory. I don't do this work alone, so a lot of it comes from the work that I've done with fellow advocate Liz Salmi, and Liz is not only a friend, she's a brain cancer patient. She is a researcher at Beth Israel Deaconess and Harvard Medical School, in addition to being a fierce advocate, an incredible person. And late last year, we published our views in Non-Perspectives. It's the journal of the National Academy of Medicine. And there are two ideas from that paper that carry this whole talk, and I want to call them out to you so you pay attention to it. Number one is the difference between what we call institutional AI versus patient-directed AI, carefully worded, patient-directed AI, and I think we call algorithmic resistance, and I'll get to both. So when I say AI, I'm not talking about one AI. As a patient or as a caregiver, from where I stand, there isn't just one AI, there are two. One works for the institution, the other works for you. Right? Institutional AI is deployed by health systems, it's deployed by payers, it's deployed by vendors, it's there to standardize workflows, it's there to manage risk, it's there to optimize for revenue, and it's not there to prioritize your values or prioritize your journey. It's a margin over mission. You guys may have heard this before. Institutional efficiency and risk often come before patient values. And oftentimes doctors don't even choose these tools. They are assigned to them by the institution, mostly for compliance and for other institutional goals. And I'm not talking about just the scribes or the ambient AI that listens to your visit and capture notes. I'm actually talking about the AI that shapes who gets care, who gets discharged, which medication gets approved, all of it running quietly in the background, shaping our care whether we know it or not. A lot of times folks don't even know how some of the decisions were made, and they were made by predictive AI or some other algorithm. And here's the part that trips people up. Some of this AI is pointed right at you. It's in the portal. It's the chatbot on the health system's website. It's a lot of the work that you guys are developing. It's patient-facing. But if it's patient-facing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's patient-aligned. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's patient-directed. An AI that faces you is not necessarily an AI that works for you. Now, patient-directed AI is the opposite. The patient chooses the tool, the patient steers it. It lives entirely outside of the rules of the health system. You may not even, if you don't ask the right questions, you may not even notice it. We can use it to understand a diagnosis, research a treatment. We can use it to ask the weird what-if questions and back the decisions that are right for us, not the decisions that are most convenient for the health system. So the same technology in the hands of doctors or in the hands of patients can be either the lock or the key. And I've talked to some of the folks here yesterday over the break about how AI for the institution, it constrains, and in the hands of patients, it liberates. The difference comes down to who is in control, who deployed the AI, and for what purpose. And if you think that generative AI tools built for medicine are smarter than those being used by patients because they are built on medical literature, or perhaps they have access to the New England Journal of Medicine or the JAMA network, and they are pitched to clinicians as the safe alternative. Think again. A study that was published last month in Nature Medicine tested this assumption, and it seems to not be holding. And researchers from NYU, and I know there are folks here from NYU, they put the two best known clinical tools, Open Evidence and up-to-date Expert AI, up against the frontier models that the rest of us are using. That's GPT and Gemini, Claude, etc. And the general purpose frontier models outperformed specialized clinical tools across all benchmarks. And think about this. According to the study on the benchmark built from real clinical questions, the specialized clinical tools landed in the same tier as a free Google search summary. So some of the most capable medical reasoning tools available today seem to be the ones that are already in our hands. And the good news is that this is the worst AI that we'll ever have. It will continue to improve. And I want to draw your attention to something else here, because I know how important human-centered design is for all of you, and I lost count of how many times I heard the term patient-centered. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with patient-centeredness. It sounds fine, but it's a kind of a catch-all term. I think we may have to retire it, because it's not really, it's broad enough to be kind of, to some extent, kind of useless. And so, you know, and I get that we may be well-intentioned as we try to make AI more accurate, safer, and more efficient, even empathic, but none of that tells us whose side it's on. The question that matters, that should matter to us first is, and that's kind of how I like to think about it, is whether the AI expands or constrains agency, my agency. In other words, does it help people act on their own behalf, or does it keep them managed? So you can test this with 3 questions. You can ask, is the AI pointed at me or at you, at the patient? Does it serve you? Do you steer it? And so let me give you 3 terms that actually do mean something. Patient-facing, patient-aligned, and patient-directed. So if the AI is patient-facing, it may be pointed at you, and that's a term that also came up yesterday and the day before. But it says nothing about whose interests it serves. Patient-aligned, I suppose, is a little better. Perhaps the AI prioritizes patients, but it can also be designed to answer to other stakeholders, which is usually the case, and you still don't steer it. Patient-directed is the one that gets a yes across all 3. It points at you, it serves you, and you steer it. That's the one that I care most about, and I care most about it because it has, because it broadens my capacity to understand. It's because it helps me decide and act. In other words, it's potentially liberatory. When I was a kid, we had a family doctor who came to our house whenever my mom called. And back then, medicine revolved around the doctor-patient relationship, the doctor-patient dyad. That's another word that I heard, I think, yesterday. The doctor had the knowledge, the tools, the authority, and the patient had the story, the symptoms, and the need. And it was a tight partnership. And over the years, this has been dissolving. For the last couple of years, everyone has been talking about the triad. And I was a couple of meetings in Washington, D.C. this year. And I wish I had a dime for every time I heard the triad. And I was on the bandwagon as well, and for a while. But the problem I have with this is that it assumes that the AI in the room is neutral, that it's shared, and that it serves both doctor and patient. And it does not. The AI in the room answers first to whoever deployed it. Doctors actually bring their own tools that the institution handed them, and now patients are bringing their own. I bring my own recording device, my own AI, into every meeting. So it's not really a triad. It's two sides of the table, each with their own AI, each serving a different master. Somebody said a tetrad, but I think it starts getting a little complicated. And in my view, the patient side of the table is not really a hazard to be managed. It is an opportunity for all of you. It's an opportunity to design for. Thankfully, more and more patients are using it well. I often remind fellow patients and advocates that AI confabulates. I'm not saying hallucinates, because it's really more of a confabulation than anything else. And it confabulates with confidence, and it can be flat wrong sometimes and still sound completely sure of itself. Par for the course. So fluency is not accuracy. And I remind people, don't think of AI as an oracle. It is not an answer machine, so don't use it as such. Think of it as a thinking partner that you direct. It's not an oracle that you obey. And that isn't, I don't even think it's of it as a limitation. I think it's the whole point. Medicine is scientific, but its outputs are probabilistic, not deterministic, which means context matters. My dad was in hospice care 2 years ago. So much for that prediction. So, so context matters. And because context matters, the patient is not a passive data source. The patient is a source of meaning, a source of memory, values, lived experience, and above all, context that nobody else has. And it's constantly being upgraded. And I always have new context that my providers don't have. So a tool that helps patients ask better questions fits well with how medicine actually works. And when the patient directs the tool, it puts the patient in charge. That's the real shift, from getting better answers to asking better questions. And this attitude takes a new kind of health literacy. Too often, health literacy gets reduced to compliance. I have a friend who's a doctor, and I promised myself I wouldn't digress so that we stay on track, but I can't help myself. And it would be brief. And he says, no, it's not. Health literacy is not for compliance. We really are trying to help. And I get that. I get the sentiment. I'm not trying to be overly critical. But it's about this. It's about read the pamphlet, sign the form, follow the plan. We know we're the experts. You just do as we say. It's a type of uncritical health literacy, knowing just enough to follow instructions. They want that. It's know enough to follow instructions, but not enough to question them. AI is the first tool that patients have had that can actually help them do these things in real time. Question, challenge, act, and that is the point of friction that we keep hearing all the time. The patient's bringing the printout from the AI to it's challenging my authority as a physician. Maybe you well need a little challenging. Challenging is not good, makes us think. So, but even now, when I hear folks talk about the need to teach patients to use AI safely and effectively, I often think safe and effective according to whom? Who determines what is safe and effective for me, for you? Do you want me to tell you what I think is safe and effective? It's about knowing how to use AI to read the system, not just the output. So who holds the power in your care? When does the system serve itself instead of you? And what do you do when, with what you find? So in practical terms, it's about knowing where your data lives. And I forgot to move the slide. I talk to folks usually in these three different sort of buckets. So think of it, fellow patients, I say, think of it in these sort of three buckets. Knowing where your data lives, what's missing and how to get it. Every one of us now has to be a bit of a citizen informatician, understanding data formats, how much data is too much, how much is not enough for the project or the inquiry. So it's also about knowing which tool fits the job. Should I use a notebook, like say, for example, Notebook LM or something like this, to work through multiple sources? Or should I use a coding agent to build or debug something? Or perhaps I should use an audio overview to help explain a complex concept in a conversational format. Or maybe just a general purpose AI assistant is enough to help me reason through the problem. And finally, the third bucket is kind of underneath all of it. It's really about asking one question. Who is the AI really serving? Who deploys it? And for what purpose? So it's preserving your agency. I get why people are fearful. Things are moving really fast, and that can be very unsettling. And I don't think fear is wrong. It's a useful signal. But we can't stop there, and asking who the AI really serves is what stands between us being informed and being, I suppose, manipulated, for lack of a better word. And that flip from fear to agency has a name, and we're calling it algorithmic resistance, and that's the deliberate and informed use of AI to push back when the system's priorities are in conflict with yours. I'm not anti-technology, I'm not anti-AI, I'm pro-agency. And it's a move that we can all make ourselves and help others make. So I'll give you a couple of examples. This is something that happened 2 years ago. My father developed a severe rash. And this is after he was discharged from hospice. The dermatology appointment was 4 months out, and we couldn't wait. We saw the primary care doctor, and she referred us to, didn't make a diagnosis, referred us to dermatology. I scheduled the appointment 4 months out. 4, not 4 weeks or 4 days, 4 months. So, and we were happy waiting, except that one morning I brought his breakfast, and he says to me, I can't live like, he was up. He hadn't slept all night. And he says to me, I can't live like this. I scratch myself all night. It's horrible. You have to do something. And I said, Dad, we have an appointment. We're waiting. And he says, no, I can't. So I said, okay, I'll see if I can look it up on AI or look it up on Google. I actually looked up on Google first. I took pictures of the rash, but I couldn't make heads from I couldn't figure out what it was by just looking at photos. So what I decided to do is I put the photos in various different large language models. I uploaded clinical notes from the visit with the primary care, because obviously the AI couldn't see the patient, but the PCP did. And then she wrote down what she saw. So I uploaded the clinical notes, his after-visit summary for the objective data, and his labs. And I asked the AI to produce a table with differential diagnosis. And I asked the AI, give it to me in order of likelihood, and 3 columns, give me the diagnosis on the first column, and give me the rationale on the second column, because I don't trust the AI. I don't trust anything. And so I figured I need to see why it thinks it's that. But actually, I didn't even care what the diagnosis was. What I wanted was the third column, which is the intervention. And my thinking was, if there are 2 or 3 of these diagnoses that have the same intervention, we're just seeking relief. And so I'll just go for the intervention. I don't care what, I don't need to. So if you pay attention to this, this is from the point of view of the patient, my goal is completely different. The doctor wouldn't do anything without the diagnosis. They need a billing code. I'm not billing, I just need relief. So the AI was the only one that surfaced a plausible connection between the rash and the chronic kidney disease. So that is chronic kidney disease, now stage 4. And the PC primary care doctor didn't raise that as a possibility. And when I brought it up to the dermatologist, she seemed alarmed, and she says, "Oh, is he on dialysis?" And I said, "No, he's not on dialysis." At that time, he was stage 3. And the point is that I said, "Don't you have the blood test results?" And she says, "No." And this is after, in the U.S., we spent billions of dollars with meaningful use, interoperability, billions and billions of dollars. And it's 2 doctors in the same county don't have access to the same blood test. 2006, we're 25 years into the 21st century. We've lived a quarter of it already. And so, we're not even setting up our doctors to win. The poor dermatologist doesn't even have the tools that she needs in order to make an informed decision. I'm sitting with a large language model. I'm better equipped. So, sad state of things. So we made some low-risk changes with my dad. We switched with his agreement to a vegan diet, and we switched to lukewarm showers every other day instead of hot showers every day. And within 10 days, the rash cleared, months before we saw the dermatologist. When we saw the dermatologist, he was way into the picture on the right. So now for the bigger one, I'm a Kaiser Permanente member, and it's a health system in the U.S. If you're not familiar with it, has about 13 million members. And I wanted to download my health data in a format that I could feed, as I sometimes call it, my large language monsters. And so I had, I wanted, I was tired of uploading these large PDFs, and sometimes the AI wouldn't see certain things and just miss, and it was hard to, it was clunky, difficult, terrible, and it was like, oh, I wish I could have an XML file or a text file or a JSON, something that was more usable. And 2 people had already built open source tools for exactly this. Somebody had built, Josh Mandel of Microsoft, who's both a software engineer and a medical doctor, brilliant person, had built a Smart on Fire app called Health Skills. And somebody else had built another tool called Open Record, went about this, doing the same thing, pulling up the record, but through using an MCP server, just a different method. And both designed to work with Epic, EHR. And I thought, this is great. Kaiser has Epic, and so that's going to work. And both are free, and neither worked with Kaiser. Turns out Kaiser has a unique implementation of Epic that doesn't work with any of these things. And so I figured, that's a bummer. I was really disappointed. And but I'm not a coder. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure this stuff out. And so I got on Claude, and I dropped in a link to one of the projects, and I asked a simple question. I said, would this work for me? One of these? And can I just change one line? Would that work? I don't know. Help me. And I wasn't asking the AI to build anything for me, but the AI, Claude, reframed the problem, and it offered something that I hadn't thought to ask for. It gave me a starting point to build from. So it basically asked, do you want me to sketch a minimal Kaiser scrape? This is exactly what it asked me. It asked me, do you want, this is verbatim, do you want me to sketch a minimal Kaiser scraper scaffolding we would need to start? I had no idea what that meant. I was like, I don't know what a scaffolding is. What a bummer. I think I know what a scraper is because I've seen people scrape data from the web. I know that, but I don't know scaffolding. But what do I have to lose? I said, okay, yes. 2 weeks later, I had a working open source set of tools on GitHub. It's there. You can download it, you can view it, you can use it. Pulling my meds, pulling my labs, messages. It sends messages, orders medication. And I can see my visit notes. I can ask any question I want in plain English or Portuguese. And it has a name. I called it OpenKP. And again, I don't write code. I didn't even know what an MCP server was when I started this. I didn't even know how to use GitHub. What's a repo? I don't know these things. And so help me. What do I do? How do I host this? Oh, go host it here. And so Claude did everything for me. It wrote the code. It pushed it to GitHub. and he helped me deploy it. And of course, I didn't trust Claude alone. I put Codex on the case just to make sure Claude was working right. So what I did was deploy a coding agent on a problem that I had. And for my favorite part, somebody has already forked it, and they are running it on Windows, and they contacted me, and they said, yeah, this is great. I'm not a coder. And this is amazing that it works. I said, I'm amazed that it works. And so another patient. And I said, can you document, ask Claude to document what the changes are on Windows so we can update the repo so that others, on GitHub, so that others know. So it's documented. And he did. Sent me an MD file, and actually, I think I had my AI put it there. Anyway, so it's no longer one patient's hobby anymore. It's really a tool that other people are picking up and making their own. So, and here's the kind of question that a portal will never be designed to answer. Even if you are working on a project, I doubt that the powers would allow you to put this kinds of functionality. So here's a question. Read every visit note from the last 2 years. Find every time I raised a concern, I asked a question or pushed back, how was it documented? Look for patterns in how my engagement gets characterized. The answer is quite fascinating. So we're not really talking about having a prettier lab display, although you can do that too pretty well, can even build a site. But what you see here is agency over how I appear in the chart. It lets me see not just my data, but how the system sees me. That's an entirely different category of tool. And what's important is this: I am not a developer who built a tool. I'm a patient who directed an agentic AI to build a tool that I needed because the system or nobody had designed it for me. And notice the direction that we're heading. The JAMA paper that you see there on the screen names the risk, and the risk is the risk of de-skilling. That seems to be happening to some scale. When doctors rely on AI too much, they lose skills that they already have. But I never went to med school, and I'm not proud of that, but I wish I had. But I don't have the skills to lose, and so I only have. For me, I'm getting upskilled. And so the opposite is happening with patients. Patients are upskilling, directing AI to build the very access points that the institutions won't give us. Which then brings me to the barrier that we face now, and it used to be technical literacy. And many of you here remember the Night Scout project, type 1 diabetes in 2013 or so, or 14. And this is it became a movement called the We Are Not Waiting movement. And I think the hashtag is still around, created by Howard Look of tidepool.org. And many others, Dana Lewis, John Kostick, Ben West. But these are all type 1 diabetes patients who were also coders. They were people, and this was the barrier. I couldn't do that, and I watched in amazement and excitement when that was happening with the We're Not Waiting movement, because I wanted to do the same for my implantable device, but I didn't have the skills, and I didn't have a community like that, and they did. But that was back then. That was a barrier. Now it's not that anymore. Now the bar for technical literacy is much lower, as you can see. So coding is really not to the level of being able to build things like the things that I'm building. It's no longer the same barrier. So now the barrier is cost. So a $20 a month plan goes through its limits really fast, and I now am on plans that cost $100 to $200 a month for OpenAI to use Codex and to use Claude Code. And can run into thousands of dollars. Oftentimes, depending on what I'm doing, I bump against the limits, and I have to put in credits, right? So the divide is shifting, and it's no longer who can code, it's who can afford these tools. It's a patient. If we think of patient-directed AI in order to become a thing, If it ends depending on frontier model subscriptions, then we are rebuilding some of the same old inequities in a new form, and that would be not good. So that's a problem that not everyone can solve on their own. So let me go back to that doctor at the microphone at the Academy Health meeting 6 weeks ago. He said, leave it to the experts. And I've heard this from many others. A lot of folks keep saying this, don't touch it. Just leave it to us, the experts. And this is exactly what patients are being told to do, stay out of it, trust the system. But the experts are telling us this while institutional AI is actively being deployed on them, on patients, right? Sometimes even without their knowledge. So it's kind of funny, huh? It's like, no, stay away from it. Let us deploy it on you. And it raises the question that really matters to me whenever I come across AI. And I try to ask, is this a tool for me or a tool on me? And we have to be honest about that. The doctor's first question was about boundaries. He says, where's the line on what a patient should be allowed to do? And my answer to that was that train has left the station. We're not asking for permission. Thank you, but no thanks. And we're not asking permission. Patients are doing this, and we're doing it at scale. The question isn't whether we allow it, it's whether we help people do it well. And I think for you guys in this room, for all of you, it's a literacy question, it's a design question, it's a literacy question and an equity question all at once. The doctor's second question was about accountability. He says, who is responsible when something goes wrong? And I told him, of course, I'm responsible for my choices. Patients are not children. I suppose some are, but not in that room. And I asked him, who is responsible for a broken system when I can't get my 96-year-old father an appointment for 4 months while he suffers and can't sleep? And so who's responsible? Oh, that's another problem. Yeah, it is another problem. I have to solve the problems I have with the tools that are available to me. We agree to disagree, and I think the good news is that I suppose folks got to see two very different views. Now, here's one thing that neither one of us can argue with, and this is already happening at scale without permission. And this is a 2026 Gallup survey that found that 14 million American adults skipped a provider visit after using AI. That doesn't mean that every decision was wise. There are probably a lot of unwise decisions. What it means, though, is that this is already happening. It's a sign of agency. People are already using AI to make decisions that used to require a gatekeeper. And that's 14 million people who were afraid or perhaps desperate and did not have their problem resolved by simply trusting the system. And that's agency at scale. So the opposite of fear isn't trust, it's agency. So let me be honest about the limits of my own story. Everything that I told you is about me, and I'm one patient with the time and the skills and perhaps the resources to do this. And my instinct always tends to run on individual autonomy, self-determination. It's kind of my bias, so it's there for you. It's kind of how I think. But I have a good friend and a colleague in computational precision health. He calls me out on that all the time, and he's right to do that. Because I think the harder question isn't how I free myself. I think the harder question is how do we put this power in the hands of communities who have never had the AI work for them. And I'm talking poor communities, rare disease communities, indigenous communities. How do we put power in the hands of folks who need to solve their own problems? So I don't have the answer to that, but I think it should be the most important question for us. Which I suppose is exactly where you come in. I'll end on something personal. I was born in Brazil, and I grew up in a house full of books. My mother was a teacher, and some of her books were written by a Brazilian educator named Paulo Freire. And he wrote a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, A Pedagogia do Oprimido, and in exile in 1967, 68. while Brazil lived through a dictatorship. So the books on my mother's shelves weren't really books about teaching. They were subversive ideas that unsettled people in power. And it unsettled them, I suppose, those people, because that is what, I suppose, power fears. It fears when those it kept dependent learn to read for themselves. Before my mom passed away, she asked me if I wanted her pedagogy books. Some of them were original prints, and I said no. I'm not a teacher. I said, what am I going to do with pedagogy books? And I regret that deeply. And I've really never been that more wrong. So, because Freire wasn't really writing about classrooms, he was writing about power. And he argued that education is never neutral. It either teaches people to accept the world as it is, or it becomes the practice of freedom. I'm not saying that medicine is a dictatorship, and it's not my argument, but Freire gave us a language for power, and I think to some extent medicine has its own power structure. It has experts, rules, gatekeepers, and has patients. And Freire had a name for this, and he called the banking model of education, experts depositing knowledge into a silent person, told to sit still, take it in, question nothing, push back on nothing. It's in good hands, right? Medicine runs on the same model. The expert deposits and the patient receives. It remembers, the patient complies. But patients aren't really empty accounts. We bring memory, we bring context, we bring values, and we are the ones who live with the consequences. Paulo Freire taught the poor to read so they could read the world that kept them poor. And what you saw today, and what you're witnessing, I suppose, is a patient learning to read the system that reads him. And AI can help with that. I think not just any AI, perhaps patient-directed AI. Still, there's no guarantee of liberation. The same technology can make patients more compliant or more measurable or more manageable. Or it can help us question or understand and act on our own behalf. The technology does not choose, we choose, right? So as we wrap up here, I suppose I urge you to build AI tools that patients direct, not AI tools that direct patients. Right? So it's AI as liberation technology. I have a copy of the slides there for you on that link, and all the resources that I mentioned today are in that link in that subdomain. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you so much, Hugo.